and welcome to Ghana's best software tutorials bootcamp. My name is Kweku. I'm UX designer, a developer, and the lead instructor at Edutech GH Bootcamp, Ghana's best rated software tutorials bootcamp. I'm so excited to be your instructor for your tutorials journey. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also request for special tutorials in the comment section below. Thank you. Many photographers are surprised to pick up a book on Photoshop and see so much emphasis on camera raw. But to be honest with you, this is where most of our basic editing work is done today. Today's lesson is focused on using camera raw. Let's assume you have your image opened in Adobe Photoshop. We will expand the tonal range of the image. From the Photoshop interface, select Filter from the menu bar and choose Camera Raw Filter from the drop-down menu. Or use keyboard shortcut Command plus Shift plus A on Mac or Shift plus Control plus A on Windows to open the Camera Raw window. In the basic panel, press and hold the Shift key and double-click directly on the white slider. And then do the same for the black slider. This automatically expands out the whites and the blacks to their farthest point without clipping the highlights. Well, that's our plan. Occasionally, the whites do create some minor highlight clipping, which expands the overall tonal range. If you have used Photoshop in the past, you might remember doing this same type of thing, though not automatically like this, but we used to use the levels dialog to do it, and it was called setting your white and black points. This is the same thing, it's just automated, which is awesome. You might want to consider making this the first thing you do when you start to tweak your exposure amount, making the overall image brighter or darker once the white and black points are set. While there isn't just one slider that does this, the closest one is the exposure slider, found in the basic panel. It doesn't cover the darkest areas, which is the black areas, or the brightest area, which is the white areas, but it covers the all-important mid-tone range. So when it comes to exposure, it has the biggest overall effect on your image. In earlier versions of Camera Raw, there wasn't an exposure slider. Instead, this slider was called brightness, and it controlled the overall brightness. But knowing that old name helps give you some idea of what this slider mostly does. It controls the brightness. Drag it to the right, your image gets brighter. Drag it to the left, it gets darker. We will deal with clipped highlight after we control the exposure of the image. In the basic panel, drag the highlight slider to the left until the white triangle in the top right corner of the histogram turns solid black. Note that in earlier versions of Photoshop, you have to press the triangle in the top right corner to show the clipping area. The clipping area turns red. It's the same for the shadow. It turns blue, indicating the clipping area. You can now drag the slider to the left or right to adjust it without clipping. If you have to drag it way over to the left, it will start to affect the overall look of your image too much. So if you find yourself having to drag it way over to the left, first try lowering the white slider a bit and see if that helps. That way you can avoid getting the over edited look that you get from dragging any slider in Camera Raw all the way to the far left or far right. If that doesn't work and you are still clipping the highlight, another thing you can try is lowering the exposure slider a little bit. If your photo looks kind of flat, especially compared to the image you saw on the back of your camera when you took it, one of the best quick fixes is simply to increase the amount of contrast by dragging the contrast slider found in the basic panel to the right. This does a number of things besides just making the darkest areas of your image darker and the brightest areas brighter, which is pretty much what adding contrast does, because it makes the colors in your image appear much richer and more vibrant, and our eyes perceive a more contrasty image as a sharper image as well. Personally, I just use the contrast slider, but if you feel you need more control or more juice than just this one slider will provide, you can go to the tonal curve panel and either use one of the point curve preset from the pop-up menu. Or you can make the shape of any of those S-curve presets that have more contrast by clicking and dragging the point until the S shape is steeper. The steeper the S shape, the more contrast it creates. This tone curve contrast is stuck on top of anything you have already done with the contrast slider, so you can go contrast crazy. Once again, I rarely ever have to use this tone curve method because the contrast slider by itself is actually very good. But if you get in a low contrast situation, at least you know another place you can go to get more. Now let's bring out texture in our image. In the basic panel, just drag the clarity slider over to the right and any texture in the image gets immediately enhanced. Keep an eye on the screen as you drag the slider, because if you drag it too far, you will start to get black glow or halo around the edges of objects in your image, which is warning you that you are editing this image to death. How far you can go with it really just depends on the image. Images like landscape, cityscape, automotive images, anything with lot of very well defined hard edges can take a lot of clarity. Other images like portrait or flowers or things of a softer nature can sometimes take very little. Thanks for watching. Find part 2 in a link in the description below. Please subscribe to our channel for other software tutorials.